So while I do claim myself to be a quote-unquote football channel, if you read the very, very fine print, I don't really specifically specify what kind of football I am talking about. So I can talk about European football all I want, and you guys can't say anything about it. You gotta love the art of the good old loophole. Welcome back to No Huddle, or I guess we can say no penalty or something like that. Anyways, welcome back to No Huddle, and this, my friends, is a very special edition video where for once I'm going to talk about the other football, European football, and specifically the UEFA Champions League, one of my favorite competitions of all time, probably my favorite club competition of them all. Now, unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to talk about the club that I hold dearest to my heart. I am a diehard Real Madrid fan. Instead, I'm going to be talking about another club which also has a very special place in my heart. It's all the way in the back rooms where I store everything that I hate in this world, right next to dentists, to be honest. And that, my friends, is, of course, FC Barcelona. FC Barcelona is obviously still one of the greatest clubs of all time, having many figureheads that are such large representatives of the sport. You obviously have guys like Johan Cruyff, Ronaldinho, Lionel Messi, Pep Guardiola, among a bunch of other people. Obviously, like the midfielders, the defenders, the attackers. They had a tantalizing, revolutionary style of football that, honestly, and their peak of football is probably the greatest that we've ever seen any team have. It was a style of play that honestly led them to dominate world football from around 2009 to around 2015. And again, it was another method that it was effective in winning trophies, and it was also insanely tantalizing to watch. It was spearheaded by Lionel Messi, arguably the greatest player of all time. The Spanish midfield trio, which was basically flawless and the greatest midfield trio of all time. And then other guys, auxiliary players like Pedro and David Villa, along with a supporting cast of players who were some of the best players in the world, and all had their role to perfection. They last won the Champions League in 2015, spearheaded another treble, their second treble in only 6 years, and that was led by arguably the greatest attacking trio that we have ever seen with MSN, Neymar, Messi, and Luis Suarez. And overall, they also had a very decent cast of players who once again fulfilled their role to absolute perfection. Unfortunately for them and fortunate for the rest of the world, the last 11 years have been filled with a ton of failed attempts at Barcelona claiming the glory once again, saving the world from a lot of noise pollution. It's been heartbreak after heartbreak, honestly resembling a lot of other clubs in which they had golden opportunities only for them to absolutely blow it. Despite having the greatest right winger of all time and having some decent teams, overall, Barcelona have been unable and have crashed out of the Champions League over the last 11 years. So I wanted to take down a nice stroll down memory lane and reminisce of all these glorious and extremely entertaining Champions League's exits. So if you're watching this, grab some popcorn because this is about to be a very fun ride. If you guys enjoy these type of videos, please like and subscribe as any support is truly appreciated. I am still a full-time NFL channel. This is just a nice little passion project that I was really eager to make. And overall, this should be really fun, so I really hope you guys enjoy it. And let's just get started. Our story begins in probably what is the most glazed year of all time, 2016. Barcelona were the reigning Champions League winners, and they were trying to replicate their treble-winning year all over again. MSN was still firing on all cylinders, Luis Suarez was an absolute monster, and overall, it just looked like Barcelona was just gonna waltz through Europe and through Spain and dominate Europe all over again. Unfortunately, the international break in March hit, and that kind of ended up derailing the Barca squad a lot. MSN kind of derailed in some form. Overall, their unbeaten streak in La Liga that extended to around 42 games was halted at the hands of Real Madrid. And overall, it was very clear that this team wasn't really the same as they were pre-March in the sense that they weren't really invincible anymore. And this would come to haunt them when they faced their Champions League quarterfinal opponents, Atletico de Madrid. The best striker in the world, Luis Suarez, ended up scoring a brace to rally Barca to a 2-1 win after falling 1-0 behind. But unfortunately for them, at their old stadium, at the Calderón, the ties would switch a lot. Upcoming superstar Antoine Griezmann ended up scoring a brace in the opening and in the final minutes, which ended up forcing the reigning champions out in the Champions League quarterfinals, sealing a pretty heartbreaking exit, to be honest. This one did kind of hurt, as Barcelona, you could argue they were even better in the 15-16 season than they were in the treble-winning 14-15 season, and they still had a ton of chances to win, and that you could argue that they got a little bit screwed with Gabi having a handball with it not being called a penalty. Instead, it was being called a free kick. And Ter Stegen, he had a shot in the penalty that Griezmann took, which ended up winning the game. You could argue he should have probably saved that, but overall, it didn't really matter. And Barca fans, to be honest, they didn't really care all that much. They still had MSN. They would still have a ton of opportunities. Sure, this loss was kind of heartbreaking, but this would only be the beginning of a much worse journey through the Champions League. The year was now 2017, and Barcelona, unfortunately for them, they regressed a lot. While they still had MSN, overall the squad was declining a little bit, and it showed in their league results as they ended up losing the La Liga title to their bitter rivals Real Madrid. The tides in Spain had officially turned quite a bit. And overall in the Champions League, they weren't really their juggernaut selves. They needed to pull off one of the greatest and most emphatic, and flat out controversial, comebacks in football history just to get past the round of 16, which was against a very mid and mediocre PSG team. While the euphoria from that insane comeback was insane, overall it showed that this team really wasn't all that great, especially compared to the squads of the past. And this would end up costing them a lot in their quarterfinal tie against a very formidable foe in 16-17 Juventus. This team completely dominated Barcelona in Turin. They completely trounced them. MSN was completely locked down in that first leg, as the new star of the show wasn't MSN, but instead it was wonder kid Paulo Dybala. They ended up destroying Barca, winning 3-0, and unfortunately, the comeback juices were no longer in them, as a 0-0 draw ended up forcing Barca out in the quarterfinals for the second straight year now. To be honest, like Barcelona, this loss isn't really that heartbreaking from a surface standpoint. Again, this team wasn't really as great as they were, but to be honest, to put up an absolute donut against a Juventus team with prime MSN, it's just not a very good look. And again, it's even more embarrassing that your bitter rivals Real Madrid would end up facing that same Juventus team in the final, and they ended up slapping 4 past that team. Once again, it's just not a very good look for Barcelona. Now the tides in Spain were officially turning, with now Real Madrid having 12 Champions Leagues to Barcelona still only having 5. And unfortunately, Barca fans wouldn't know this, but this loss basically signaled the beginning of the end, thanks to their very incompetent president. It was the beginning of the end of the very old guard, the Barcelona that we knew of the 2010s. On to 2018 we go, and this Barcelona squad looked very, very differently. Long gone was Neymar and longtime manager Luis Enrique, and they brought in young talents with the Neymar money like Dembele and Coutinho, and in the manager role would be Ernesto Valverde. This team now was very, very Messi reliant, as the attackers were overall very inconsistent and didn't really pan out. Suarez was starting to show his age and becoming a shell of his former self. And overall, this squad was pretty flawed and was starting to kind of crumble down with age and just overall lack of talent. Despite them cruising in Spain, no one would really tell you that this Barcelona was like the greatest of all time, as once again, the squad was very flawed and bailed out by individual talent, but still, they cruised in La Liga, and in the Champions League, they were able to make a pretty decent run up until they ran to Roma in the quarterfinals. Despite that, unfortunately for Roma, the first leg was an entire breeze. 2 own goals set back Roma a ton, making them fall behind 2-0, and overall, Barcelona got a really dominant result. Piqué would put a third past the net, and Suarez would make it 4 to seal an incredible 4-1 win for Barca. Didn't matter that Roma scored a consolation goal. It was 4-1, and it looked like Barcelona was just going to cruise onto the semi-final for the first time in around 3 years. But hold it. We have to wait just 1 second. If you guys do not know the rules of the Champions League, there is something called the away goal rule, which was still a thing up until 2021, which means in 2018, this was still a thing, which means Roma only needed 3 goals to advance. They would not need 4 to turn around the tie. And overall, the second leg in Roma was an absolute nightmare for Barcelona. Edin Dzeko scored within just 6 minutes, and just like that, it was basically game on. Barcelona was unable to string together some passes. They didn't make a sub until the 83rd minute, which, to be honest, was questionable to say the least. And overall, Roma just kept putting on the pressure. They ended up winning a penalty in the second half, which made it only a one-score game. And in the 83rd minute, the miracle was complete for Roma. Manolas fired a free header in the far post past Barca to put Roma ahead on away goals. It was just such an emphatic comeback. The Greek god had saved Roma from their ruins, and Barcelona was left stunned as the collapse had officially happened, and for the third straight year, they bowed out in the quarterfinals. Now, on the surface, this heartbreak isn't that bad because, once again, this squad was just not very good. Like, this team really wasn't all that great. But to blow a 3-goal lead and to just have this absolute coaching malpractice to take place, it was just absolutely heartbreaking for some Barcelona fans, and it feels like this was just rock bottom. This would be the worst collapse that they would suffer. But oh boy, Barca fans, do I have a treat for you guys with this upcoming year. We moved towards the year 2019, which, to be honest, was just a completely exact same version of 2018, but on a bunch of steroids. Messi was an absolute alien in this year. This might have been the best version of himself in his entire career. The amount of playmaking and scoring that he did with the supposed attacking support that he had was just absolute nuts. And to be honest, the rest of the team wasn't all that great. Suarez was getting older, and once again, he was just more of a shell of his former self. And the rest of the squad, again, wasn't really all that much to write home about. Now, luckily, their rivals in Spain were basically the current version of Tottenham Hotspur, so they were still able to claim the league title with relative ease. And in the Champions League, they were putting together a really good campaign, mostly thanks to Messi having, honestly, one of the best tournaments of his entire career. And this led to a clash of the Titans in the semifinals against a very formidable team in Liverpool FC. Now, Liverpool was probably the favorite going into this matchup as they were one of the juggernauts of the world, but when you have Messi, anything was possible, to be honest. And stop me if you've heard this before, but the first leg was all Barcelona. Suarez kicked off the scoring in the first half, and in the second half, it was just all Messi magic. He tapped in a second goal, and then later in the second half, he pulled off one of the greatest free kicks I had ever seen in my entire life. Just an absolute thing of beauty, and it was the icing on the cake to an absolutely incredible 3-0 win. It looked like Barcelona was just going to make the final once again and finally reclaim that 6th Champions League trophy. Going into Anfield for the second leg, Liverpool was trying to stage a comeback, but they would be very, very undermanned. 2 stars on their attack, Roberto Firmino and Mohamed Salah, would be out, which means that the chances of a comeback for Liverpool kind of seemed a little fugazi. But either way, they would pounce early in the return leg, and Divock Origi would put one behind the net in just 7 minutes, and just like that, Liverpool had a lifeline. But again, it didn't really matter for Barcelona as they still had a 3-1 lead, and as long as they didn't lose their heads and kept their composure, they should be fine. What's the worst that could happen? Well, the fact that in halftime, they cried in the locker room. Jordi Alba was crying in the locker room when they still had a 3-1 lead on aggregate. Overall, Jordi Alba, you and Barcelona, you're just absolute losers for this. Again, you're not even eliminated, and you're crying as if you've already collapsed. You still had a 2-goal lead. Why are you crying? It just shows that Barcelona, in this stage, they just really had no backbone. My left back, personally, they would absolutely never. Anyways, the second half would officially hit with Barcelona still having a 2-goal lead, yet their midfield kept getting outrun and outplayed by a midfield consisting of James freaking Milner and Jordan Henderson. But overall, Liverpool kept dominating in the second half. Gini Wijnaldum would come off as a super substitute and would put another back in the net to make it 2, and then just 2 minutes later, he would make it 3 with an absolute wide-open header. It was officially 3-3, and overall, all the momentum in the entire game would basically be on Liverpool's side, and it was kind of inevitable that a winner was pretty much inevitable. Messi was trying to do everything in his power, but overall, he was basically alone as he was trying to create chances and trying to do stuff, but no one in the attack was about to help him. And overall, the game winner would officially come in the 78th minute when Trent Alexander-Arnold fired a corner unbeknownst to all the Barcelona players, in which Divock Origi was wide open, and he put it in the back of the net to seal the 4th goal and officially put Liverpool in front. The tie had officially swung, and Liverpool would cement themselves with one of the greatest comebacks in football history, and they would head to Madrid for the Champions League final. This one is an absolute heartbreaker for Barca. Like the fact that the final was literally within your grasp. You were this close. You had a 3-goal lead and then you blew it. Like it's just so embarrassing. And also, what adds insult to injury is the fact that you wasted this version of Lionel Messi, arguably the best player of all time in his best form. This one, for many Barca fans, you could argue that it's the worst one of all the Champions League exits. But luckily for you guys, we still have a long way to go, and a lot of heartbreak still ensues. 2020, to be honest, was a lot more conventional when it comes to the classic Barcelona Champions League exits. Now in the COVID-19 pandemic, Barcelona was absolutely dreadful under new manager Quique Setién. The squad was overall thinning in quality, and while Messi was overall still really great, he wasn't the Goku version of himself that he was the previous year, which means he wasn't able to carry such a mediocre roster. Barcelona was now in crippling financial debt. Their squad was just consisting of a bunch of old, washed players who were out of their prime, or a bunch of new signings who overall weren't really panning out. They lost La Liga to Real Madrid. They had some absolutely disgusting kits, and to be honest, the football might have been worse than the kits. Despite that, they still made a decent run in the Champions League. They made it all the way to the quarterfinals until they met up with the absolute titan that they had to go up against, which was 2020 Bayern Munich. And I'm going to have a content warning for those who may not be able to watch this next segment, maybe those who are prone to being disgusted by absolute atrocities done to a club. Bayern Munich won 8-2. Yes, they just won 8-2. They sapped Barcelona with 8 goals in one of the worst humiliation rituals in football history, as Bayern Munich basically waltzed into the goal in every single time that they had. And overall, Barcelona was left stunned, lost, and embarrassed. Their defense was practicing social distancing with the fact that they just allowed Bayern Munich to just stroll through and have a wide open chance pretty much every single time. Muller completely destroyed them. Alphonso Davies sent Semedo back to Wolves with an insane move that he did on him. And the worst part of it all, not even of all the 8 goals, Coutinho, a guy that they loaned out to Bayern Munich after flopping with them, scored the 7th and the 8th goal to wrap up that insane humiliation ritual. To be honest, for me, in my opinion, this is on par with 7-1 in the 2014 World Cup, as just one of the most nefarious performances in football history, with it was just such atrocious defending. It's not even funny. Muller, Perisic, Gnabry, Muller again, Kimmich, Lewandowski, Coutinho, and Coutinho again, and that is how we get to 8-2. Overall, Bayern Munich just flexed all their muscle that they had, while Barcelona's main man, Messi, was just able to stand there with no one absolutely helping him, and overall, they were just extremely powerless. Now, this Barcelona, from a Barcelona's perspective, this exit isn't really that bad if you ignore the scoreline, because Bayern Munich was clearly the better team, and overall, Barca was just not very good. They weren't really expected to beat Bayern Munich. But to lose 8-2 is just unacceptable. That is just absolutely embarrassing. In my opinion, they should still get clowned on for this. Like, conceding 8 goals in just 90 minutes when some struggle to get 8 goals in around 3 games is just absolutely unfathomable. Overall, just a terrible result for Barcelona, and unfortunately for them, it just didn't seem like there was an end in sight to this new FC Barcelona banter era. Still in the COVID-19 pandemic, 2021 was, to be honest, some more of the same. It was kind of forgettable, to be completely honest with you guys. Barcelona were very, very mediocre in this season. Now under new manager Ronald Koeman, they kicked Suarez out of the club after some very great years with him. What's really funny is that he ended up winning La Liga with Atletico that same year and dunking on Barca. But anyways, Barcelona ended up meeting a really, really good PSG side in just the round of 16. And while they did start with a nice 1-0 lead thanks to a Messi goal, they were in no way in hell gonna beat up the dictator this time. He ended up absolutely dunking on them with a great hat trick, sealing a very big 4-1 victory, and it showed that the future was now with Messi fading out and Mbappe coming in. They had a slight chance at a comeback with Messi scoring an absolute banger to try and cut the lead in Paris in the second leg, but then a missed penalty saved by Keylor Navas ended up sealing the 1-1 draw and basically just putting a nail in the coffin in Barcelona's season. This would mark Messi's final moments in the Champions League with Barca. This was probably the most heartbreaking moment in Barcelona history, with Messi leaving their club, even above any other Champions League exits. To be honest, this kind of makes me sad as well. But in the context of the Champions League, this one is really, again, it's very forgettable. To be honest, making fun of Barca is like making fun of a handicapped kid at this point. Now, again, I still don't feel bad. I'm still glad that they got knocked out. But this team was just very, very mediocre. And overall, in the Champions League, they had to rebuild. It was very clear they weren't going to win the Champions League anytime soon. But unfortunately for them, clubs were still going to beat up on them no matter what form they were in. We're able to take a break for the next 2 years, 2022 and in 2023, because yes, my friends, Barcelona was so bad in these 2 periods in the Champions League that they ended up getting grouped in the group stages and they had to be sent down to play in the Europa League, the beta competition where all the inferior clubs, all the small clubs try and win a European trophy. In 2022, they were atrocious, getting dunked on by Bayern Munich 2 more times and letting Darwin Núñez, of all people, dunk on them while he was in Benfica. They amassed a measly 6 points overall, and they only scored 2 goals the entire group stage. And despite winning the league in 2023, they once again ended up collapsing in great fashion, once again dropping 2 more games to Bayern Munich. That's 5 losses in a row to the same club, by the way, at this point. And overall, I'm not going to go in depth about these exits because this is a video dedicated to the Champions League, but just know that they couldn't even win the Europa League. They couldn't even make it out of the beta competition of Europe. They got dunked on by Frankfurt in their own stadium while allowing the Frankfurt fans to absolutely invade the Camp Nou. And then in 2023, they got dunked on by Erik ten Hag's Man United of all teams while letting Antony score a game winner. Just truly embarrassing. They couldn't even make the semi-final of the Europa League. That's just so hard to grasp. But again, similar to the 8-2, I just don't think that we let these guys off the hook. I think we let these guys off the hook way too much. They got grouped twice. That's just absolutely crazy. We have to do a major time skip now and skip all the way to 2024, where congrats Barcelona, you guys finally made it to the Champions League knockout. Unfortunately, this squad in the 23-24 season was also insanely mediocre. Now managed by club legend Xavi of all people, to be honest, the football was kind of disgusting to watch. They scraped by results a ton, and overall, again, the football, it was not entertaining. It was not the typical FC Barcelona that we know and I guess somewhat admire. But overall, Barcelona still made a pretty decent Champions League campaign. They beat Napoli in the round of 16, and they got really lucky in getting the easy side of the bracket. Overall, it looked really likely that they could make a trip to the final to Wembley Stadium, and anything could happen. Maybe they could win the 6th. All they had to do is beat PSG in now the Champions League quarterfinals, a team that was failing over and over again and now post-super team, now managed by former Barca manager Luis Enrique. Again, it looked like a trip to Wembley was very, very likely. And the first leg was a vintage Champions League night. Who needs Messi when now you have your new Mr. Champions League, a new superstar in Rafinha, and overall Barcelona got an overall incredible result in Paris, and they walked away with a 3-2 win. Who cares that Dembele, that absolute snake, left them and scored and celebrated? It didn't matter because they had an incredible cast of players who they were still able to win. And overall, optimism was growing as Mbappe and company were completely locked down. And overall, it just looked like PSG was just no match. Going into Montjuic, once again, there was a lot of hope and optimism in Barcelona. It looked like this was going to be another iconic Champions League night in which they finally make the semi-final for the first time since 2019. And it was looking that way too as young superstar Lamine Yamal, at just 16 years old, skinned Nuno Mendes to assist Rafinha's 3rd goal of the tie. They now led 4-2 on aggregate. It didn't matter. Their new man was here. Rafinha was about to propel them, and Barcelona were on their way to the Champions League semi-final. Nothing could get in their way. They only had themselves to beat. But wait, just 1 second. They would be fine if it weren't for this absolute bozo Araujo who would commit a very stupid foul on Bradley Barcola and get himself sent off. Nothing like a good old combo of Barcelona players, Barcelona defenders, and getting in their own way. And sadly, this was a very huge blow for Barcelona, as now you could argue their best defender at the time was out. And PSG, they smelled blood in the waters of Barcelona, and Barcelona players, they started trembling a little bit. Dembele ended up going back to his old team and scoring once again his second goal of the tie. And overall, the optimism for PSG ended up growing and they got some momentum back. Vitinha ended up scoring an absolute banger to start the second half, and that leveled the tie now at 4-4, and it was starting to slip away from Barcelona, and the collapse was happening right in front of their eyes. It didn't help matters that their coach, who had no composure whatsoever, Xavi, ended up getting sent off for, I guess, dissent or whatever, for kicking stuff. And now Barcelona were just truly, truly demoralized, and they were back to their choking ways. Then this bozo Joao Cancelo ended up committing a very dumb foul in the box, which ended up conceding a penalty. Mbappe put it through, and just like that, the tie was officially in PSG's favor. Barcelona did everything in their power to try and score a goal, but overall it wasn't meant to be, as their chances kept falling short, and this led, my friends, to one of the funniest goals that I've seen in a while. PSG ended up taking it away on the corner. Mbappe's shot, he tried to put it away, but it got saved. Marco Asensio tried to shoot it, but then that got saved. But then the ball ended up going off of Fermin's butt right to Mbappe, who ended up putting it home, sealing the 4-1 win to PSG, putting the nail in the coffin. And just like that, Barcelona had failed to hold on to a 2-goal lead and fumbling away to a very mid PSG side, to be honest, and letting their former player Dembele completely dunk on them. Overall, this was just an embarrassing exit, getting knocked out by PSG 2 straight times in the Champions League, 2021 and in 2024. Now, overall, this team wasn't very good. They got dunked on a lot this year. They just overall were very mediocre. But just once again, in the way that they lost in this tie, conceding 4, having a 2-goal lead, letting Mbappe dunk on them, and the fact that PSG ended up blowing it as well, it just made it even worse for Barcelona, as they just blew away a golden opportunity. Overall, it just seemed like this bad team still had a really good chance. How do you bottle to pre-2025 PSG? That's just unfathomable. We officially reached the penultimate year of this entire video, 2025. And this, my friends, this is one of the big ones, and to be honest, it's one of my favorites. Barcelona officially returned to their pedestal of Europe's elite in 2025, now managed by Hansi Flick. He completely transformed Barcelona into an absolute goal-scoring machine. A superstar trio headlined by Lamine Yamal, a rejuvenated Lewandowski, and now a Ballon d'Or contender Rafinha. A midfield that, to be honest, in that year was a little flawless and was overall very complete. And a back line that had an incredible system with the high line. And overall, they just had a ton of individual quality. Overall, this team got their lick back on pretty much every single team, and they played some pretty good football. They absolutely destroyed Real Madrid. They absolutely destroyed Bayern Munich, and overall, they cruised in Spain, and it looked very, very promising in their Champions League campaign as well. Benfica was no match for their 2 superstar wingers, and overall they scraped past Dortmund, but this year it looked like it would be the one. It looked very likely. It looked like it was written in the stars. This team had already won a domestic treble. They had the Copa del Rey, the Super Cup, and La Liga. All that was left to secure that all-elusive 3rd treble was just the 6th Champions League. And in the semi-final, they would match up with Inter Milan, a very, very good team with themselves, who beat Bayern Munich to get to the semifinal. But overall, Barcelona, they looked to be the favorites, as they looked better on the eye and overall results-wise. But either way, this is going to be an absolute movie. Unfortunately for Barcelona, the first couple of seconds for this game started out in the worst way possible. Marcus Thuram scored an absolute incredible backheel goal to put Inter ahead in just 30 seconds, and then Dumfries would score an incredible goal to put them up 2-0, and overall it looked like Barcelona had officially met their match. But alas, this team, this 24-25 Barca, was absolutely made for comebacks. They basically did a bunch of them. They came back for breakfast, so it was time for them to get to the 3rd gear, and they were able to get to work. Lamine Yamal pulled off an absolute wonder goal, spinning the defense and just scoring an absolute beauty. And that was before Ferran Torres ended up scoring once again in a flash. And just like that, it was already 2-2 in just the first half. It was an absolutely incredible game. Now, unfortunately, their defense would still falter as from a free kick, Dumfries would end up scoring his second goal of the game and putting Inter up ahead once again 3-2. So Barcelona needed to come back once again, and they turned to their superstar man Rafinha, the new Mr. Champions League, as he fired an absolute belter to make it 3-3, and it's an absolute thriller, and that is where it would end at Montjuic, 3-3, with everything, all the chips would be on the table in a trip to San Siro. Overall, this first leg was absolute fireworks, one of the best games that I've ever seen. And what if I told you that this second leg might have been even better in terms of entertainment? Once again, Inter got the upper hand very quickly as Lautaro Martinez ended up scoring the first goal of the tie in around the 26th minute. And then Inter won a penalty thanks to a bad foul from Cubarsí. And overall, Barcelona, it looked like they were going to get in their own way once again. They were down 2-0 once again, but overall, it didn't matter because we knew that this team was made for the comebacks. It was just one more comeback that they needed. Just if they could come back one more time, they would be able to make the Champions League final. And just like that, Barcelona ended up putting some pressure on Inter in the second half. And Eddie Garcia would come through to score the breakthrough. An incredible volley to make it 2-1. And then in a flash, Dani Olmo ended up scoring a free header to make it 2-2 on the night. Just like that, Barca had already come back and everything was to play for once again. Lamine Yamal kept creating a bunch of chances and he overall just had an incredible performance. But unfortunately, up until the 90th minute, nothing was really coming as they couldn't get past Inter's goalkeeper, Jan Sommer, who overall was just having an absolute masterclass on that day. But then, in the 87th minute, it would come. The breakthrough. Rafinha would come in and on the second try, he would get past Sommer and he would score the goal that would send Barcelona to the Champions League final. Catalonia was an absolute jubilation. Their star man, their Ballon d'Or winner, had done it. Barcelona fans, they were cheering all over the place. It was finally time after 10 years. They were finally going to make the final and win the Champions League. It was written in the stars. Here comes their treble. Years of heartbreak. It didn't matter. All of that was thrown out the window as this team was officially going to win the sixth one and officially stamp themselves in the history books as one of the greatest teams of all time. So we move on to the Munich 2025 Champions League final. But wait, we still have stoppage time to go in the semi-final. Man, don't stop playing with me. What the hell is Inter going to do in stoppage time? They hadn't really done anything in the entire second half. Well, my friends, let me introduce you to Francesco Acerbi, a center back who hadn't scored the entire year. In the dying seconds, the dying final 2 minutes of the game, he slapped a goal past Ronald Araujo to level the tie literally as Barcelona was this close to the Champions League final. They had gone from absolute jubilation and pretty much ultimate euphoria to just being stunned as their Champions League final appearance was just snatched away in front of their eyes. And just like that, they had blown another big opportunity. They had officially blown another chance, but it's okay because we still have extra time to go. But unfortunately for Barca, Inter would once again break through just like in all two of the games. Thuram ended up spinning around Araujo to get near the touchline, and overall Fratesi ended up firing a shot pretty much completely undefended, which got into the back of the net to mark the seventh goal for Inter in this tie, and they were officially 4-3 ahead. And unfortunately for Barca, even though they were the comeback kings the entire time, this is the one that broke the camel. This is the straw that broke the camel's back. They couldn't get past Jan Sommer as he won man of the match. And overall, he ended up making insane save after insane save. They missed chance after chance. And overall, Inter ended up punching their ticket to the Champions League final in one of the most insane Champions League ties we have ever seen. This one is a really, really heartbreaking one for Barca. And you could argue that it's the worst one. It's up there with Anfield, a lot of fans say. And overall, once again, it's heartbreaking because of how close they were. They were literally seconds away. They were like a minute and a half away from being in the Champions League final. If they had just held on for a minute more, they would have been good. But also, what makes this one worse is just how overall the team was still really, really good. This wasn't a squad that was really, really mediocre and was just carried by one man. This was a legit formidable unit, which overall played some great football and they got some great results, yet they still weren't able to do it. It just felt like Barcelona was cursed and it felt like they just weren't meant to win the Champions League. And me, I was absolutely ecstatic because I did not want to see this team win the Champions League, and I am a very shameless human being. This loss made me insanely happy. It was overall even more embarrassing after Inter completely collapsed in the Champions League final and then lost 5-0 to PSG. That was just insult to injury that Barca clearly could have made the Champions League final, and you could argue they deserved it, yet they still couldn't do it. And well, my friends, this has been a very, very fun journey, but we are nearing the conclusion. We have one more year, one more heartbreak, one more exit to talk about. And so we reach the present day, 2026. We're officially at the finish line of this incredible video, and of course, this exit is just as fun and entertaining as all the others. Unfortunately for Barca, they actually started out not very great in their 25-26 campaign. They fell a lot. They overall had some really bad results and were not playing very well. Overall, it seemed like they had regressed, but after a couple of bad results, they ended up rebounding, and now they became the goal-scoring machine that we all know them to be. Lamine Yamal had officially taken a leap and now was arguably the best player in the world, and he was helped alongside Rafinha and Rashford and all these other attacking threats. Overall, they were back to being one of the best attacking teams in the world. And while their defense was about as useful as wet cardboard, they now had officially a new shot stopper as well in Joan Garcia, who was there to come through in the clutch moments to help out the defense when they needed it most, because, of course, you can't win the Champions League without a world-class goalkeeper. Overall, Barcelona cruised in Spain once again thanks to this sad, pathetic excuse of a football club that I call Real Madrid, but ignoring that, Barcelona's aspirations were clearly not in Spain. Their aspirations are always in the Champions League. As well as in the league, they started off pretty rocky, getting some bad results, but then they rallied off a couple of good performances, and then in the round of 16, they absolutely thrashed Newcastle, scoring 7 goals and giving them all the optimism that they needed. Their team was officially firing on all cylinders, and overall, Barca looked like a contender again. And wouldn't you know it, similar to 2024, Barcelona got the easy side of the bracket, avoiding a lot of the hard opponents that are in the competition, and a trip to Budapest for the 2026 Champions League final looked very, very likely for Barcelona. But there's something about history, and that is that history tends to repeat itself. It's something that makes me love history so much. And in this video, we're officially reaching full circle. We have to travel back in time all the way to the beginning of the video in the year 2016, where we're going to meet the biggest chokers in Champions League history and the original cause for Barcelona's heartbreak, the cut club that we all know as Atlético de Madrid. Now, every single player was gone from 2016, basically, outside of Koke, but they would still present Barca with a big challenge. But in the first leg at the new Camp Nou, overall, Barcelona, they started off pretty well. They were creating some chances, and overall, once again, they were very optimistic, as this was the new Camp Nou, which Barcelona had never lost in, and Simeone had also never even won at the Camp Nou. But even still, this was going to be a big battle. Once again, Barcelona created some chances, and overall, they looked like they had a nice control of the game, but then in one moment, all their hopes and dreams basically ended in the snap of a finger. Kiko from Chavo del Ocho ended up causing a really, really stupid foul on the Nepo baby, Giuliano Simeone, which got himself a straight red card. Once again, a Barca defender getting in their own way. Call me shocked. And Julian Alvarez absolutely cashed it in immediately with this absolute banger of a free kick to put Atlético de Madrid 1-0 up. And overall, this killed a lot of the morale for Barcelona. They tried creating some chances, but overall, they weren't really able to break down, as no one outside of Rashford was really able to create anything. And once again, Barcelona, it looked like they were just going to try, but yet still no goal would come available. And Barcelona would pay the price as their monster under the bed, their kryptonite, their Achilles heel, their weakness potion, overall, whatever you want to call their weakness. He appeared in the name of Alexander Sorloth, the man with the touch of an actual brick, ended up putting another goal past the net to wrap up a historic 2-0 result an absolute upset for the ages as Barcelona was left shocked. Simeone had officially won for the first time at the Camp Nou in his entire career, and Barcelona were officially in a terrible position as they now had to go to the Wanda Metropolitano, a place where Atletico puts on a lot of intensity in hopes for a very unlikely remontada. But hey, Barcelona still had a lot of beliefs. They had come back before, other teams had come back before on Atletico, and overall, Atletico were known for collapsing in the Champions League a lot. So, of course, they still went in this with a fighting chance. And just like that, in the second leg, it would kick off really well as double agent Lenglet would come back to finally help Barcelona as Lamine Yamal would take advantage of the error and put it past the net in just 4 minutes. They had already had a lifeline and they still had basically the entire game to go. This would be their version of the remontada. This was their version of Anfield. And just like that, they would strike again very quickly in just 24 minutes as Dani Olmo would feed Ferran and he would put it in the back of the net. And just like that, the tie was leveled. Barcelona were officially back in it. That is what I would say if their defense wasn't as leaky as I had mentioned before. The wet cardboard defense struck again as Lookman ended up putting it past the net after getting around the high line. And just like that, Barcelona were behind and needed another goal. And Simeone, obviously in the second half, was going to do Simeone things and pretty much defend for his absolute life by parking the bus. Barcelona tried to create chance after chance, fighting for their dear lives, but overall, the only thing that they were able to muster was a disallowed goal by Ferran for offside, and again, it just felt like the tie was slipping away from Barca. But yet again, Lamine Yamal, he tried to fight. He ended up having a decent performance, but overall, their dreams would come crashing down in around the 78th minute when Eddie Garcia would end up fouling Alexander Sorloth, the kryptonite, once again. He strikes again, and Eddie Garcia, the odds were not in his favor as he was presented with another red card. That is 2 red cards back-to-back in the same tie. And that was basically what killed Barcelona's morale once again, as they tried creating some chances in stoppage time, but overall, it wasn't meant to be, and with 10 men, they couldn't muster the comeback, and Atletico had officially knocked out Barcelona for the second time in 10 years, third time in 13 years, repeating an exact version of 2016. Now, looking at the surface, Barcelona, this result wasn't as bad. It definitely wasn't as worse as the Milan result from last year. That one was absolutely heartbreaking. But it's just the fact that they still had expectations. This Barcelona team still had the standard. They were still expecting themselves to make the Champions League final or to at least win the Champions League. And overall, this Atletico team is good, but it's not all that great. And again, Barcelona were the big favorites and they should have beaten this Atletico team. But hey, I'm never going to wish Atletico to succeed. I hope they get knocked down in the next round. But from a Real Madrid fan, I salute to you, Atletico, and good job. Good job, Simeone. You did good on this one. And so, my friends, that is the story of every single Barcelona Champions League exit since the year 2015. Personally, I had a great time going over all of these exits one by one. If I had to pick a favorite, I'd probably say Inter 2025, although Anfield 2019 is a close second. To be honest, I can't pick a favorite among these 10. It's like picking a favorite food at a 5-star buffet. There's just so much variety and so many great options to choose from. But now talking from a big picture perspective, how on earth is this happening every single year? We've seen big clubs like a Man City or a PSG falter time and time again over the last 10 years, but even then, they had a year in which they finally got over the hump where everything went right and they were finally able to capture the Champions League. How can a club like Barcelona falter time and time again and fail to win the Champions League when sometimes these games are literally handed to them on a silver platter for them to take? Well, in my opinion, there's a multitude of reasons. First of all, sometimes their team just simply isn't good enough. We saw that in 2017, in 2020, in 2021, or even in 2024, when overall they just don't have a good team and then they get knocked out by a superior opponent. And to be honest, it happens. Sometimes one team is just better than the other, and it's just not very embarrassing when they lose to a better team. That is, unless you lose 8-2 to them. In that case, it would be very embarrassing. The second reason why Barca hasn't won the Champions League is overall, they lack the clutch gene in the Champions League when it comes to these last 11 years or so. I mentioned this in some of my other videos when it comes to clutch gene, but overall, There's just something about Barcelona in which it feels like they just don't have the mentality to win these type of games. It feels like they just lose their heads way too much. They don't have like the mental capacity to execute in these big situations. We see teams in which they're able to win the championship because they actually stay level-headed and they make very key decisions. Look at Real Madrid in 2022 when they subbed on Rodrigo, or in 2024 when they subbed on Joselu. Meanwhile, you have Barcelona, in which they have their players crying in the locker room, or not making any subs in the 83rd minute, or overall just having a really, really bad mentality. And even when they're getting outplayed, like they just don't have a will to fight back. And in terms of the Inter game, for me, that's just kind of them like just basically having an identity of just choking. That's just who you are at that point. You're just not able to execute in big stretches of the game, no matter how good your team is. The third reason, and in this one, I'll give Barcelona a bit of a break. We can talk about the referees just to be fair to you guys. In all fairness to Barcelona, there have been some calls that have costed them in the past in some of these Champions League games. You have the controversial Araujo red card. You have the Gabi handball, which should have been a penalty. You have the controversial play in which Dumfries, you could argue he fouled Gerard Martin before Acerbi's goal. You have we had the officiating of this year in which the ref, you could argue, made some very big mistakes, which harmed Barcelona a lot against Atletico. And hey, I get it. I know what dealing with the refs is. I personally, my club, have been dealing with the refs a lot. Hell, our rival has been paying the refs for around 17 years from now, and we deal with it a lot. But overall, the refs are not the biggest reason as to why Barcelona keep losing in the Champions League. Their very annoying fan base can blame Real Madrid. Their owner can blame Real Madrid for every bad thing that happens under the freaking sun. But the truth is that Barcelona have been absolute chokers since around 2015. And overall, if they want to win, they need to capture that elite ability that they had in 2009 or in 2011 or even in 2015, where they actually executed in the important moments. Stop blaming the refs and blame yourselves for actually being just terrible in this competition sometimes. And overall, it's just the excuses that this team makes. It just infuriates me so much. And I'm so glad that they're actually losing in the competition, because then their fans, they cry and make excuses and they finally eat karma for being just annoying pieces of crap for the entire year. Honestly, Rafinha, he's just such a loser for complaining. What do you mean you have 7 different quotes in which you were robbed? No, Rafinha, you weren't robbed. Your team just sucked and couldn't be a pretty mediocre Atletico team. Barcelona, I swear to God, they're just a bunch of babies. And overall, like I just enjoy seeing them suffer, and I enjoy seeing them cry every single time. Now, overall, going back to being objective, Barcelona, they will win the Champions League in the future. Their core is just way too talented and way too young not to. It would be one of the biggest failures in football history if they don't win a Champions League at all. But until they are able to unlock some sort of clutch gene and not choke when it matters the most, Barcelona will be forever the biggest joke in all of Europe. They'll be the biggest chokers in European football. And I, as a Real Madrid fan, will relish in it a ton. Their failure is like clockwork, and to be honest, I have absolutely no shame. I am going to relish in this pain a lot. I hope Barcelona continues to suffer. I hope they continue to lose, so then their fans can cry and it can heal some of the pain that I have from my team being absolutely incompetent. Yes, I am coping a lot, but hey, I am a shameless human being after all. But that is all I have for you guys today, my glorious viewers. Thank you so much for watching. I spent a lot of time working on this video, so I really hope you guys really enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, please subscribe and please like, as any support is truly appreciated. Again, it would mean so much, as I worked a lot on this video. But once again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.